الزائل وهل يرحم الزاعل إلا الدائم مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرازق وأنا المرزوق وهل يرحم المرزوق إلا الرازق مولاي يا مولاي أنت الجواد وأنا البخيل وهل يرحم البخيل إلا الجواد مولاي يا مولاي أنت المعافي وأنا المبتلى وهل يرحم المبتلى إلا المعافي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الكبير وأنا الصغير وهل يرحم الصغير إلا القوي كبير مولاي يا مولاي أنت الحادي وأنا الضال وهل يرحم الضال إلا الحادي مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرحمن وأنا المرحوم وهل يرحم المرحوم إلا الرحمن مولاي يا مولاي أنت السلطان وأنا الممتحن وهل يرحم الممتحن إلا السلطان مولاي يا مولاي أنت الدليل وأنا المتحير وهل يرحم المتحير إلا الدليل مولاي يا مولاي أنت الغفور وأنا المذنب وهل يرحم المذنب إلا الغفور مولاي يا مولاي أنت الغالب وأنا المغلوب وهل يرحم المغلوب إلا الغالب مولاي يا مولاي أنت الرب وأنا المربوب وهل يرحم المربوب إلا الرب مولاي يا مولاي أنت المتكبر وأنا الخاشع وهل يرحم الخاشع إلا المتكبر مولاي يا مولاي ارحمني برحمتك وارض عني بجودك وكرمك وفضلك يا ذا الجود والامتنان والطول والجود والإحسان والطول والامتنان برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Mu'mineen, recite Surah Fatiha for all marhum mu'mineen mu'minat, especially marhumin of sponsors family. Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم القارعة ما القارعة وما أدراك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالإهن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك ما هي نار حامية صدق الله العلي العظيم.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على Muhammad وآل محمد وجل. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumeens of sponsors of tonight iftars, as well as include your marhumeens as well. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا بالقاسم مصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. وقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. Please recite aloud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج. In a few moments which we have tonight, inshallah, we are going to dissect and dive down into the topic of what is a spiritual workout or what is a spiritual gym. And we selected this topic for a purpose that these days we see everyone around us who is actually trying to strengthen their physical body. Everybody wants to go to the gym. They are actually very much interested into the workout. They want to strengthen their muscles, the physical muscles which you and I possess, in order to actually save ourselves from any injuries going forward, so that maybe as we progress in our ages, as we get old, we have some muscle mass which remains in our body, and that can actually help us in inflicting and saving us from inflicting any injuries and pain as well. In contrast, we see that a human body is made up of two things. One is the body, the physical body, and the other is the soul, the spirit. So these days, human beings actually focus a lot on strengthening the physical body, but we don't pay that much attention in order to make our spirit or our spiritual bodies strong. So keeping that in mind, we are going to discuss a few things with regards to the spirit, the soul of the human body. How can that be strengthened, and how this holy month of Ramadan can enable us, and it can provide maybe a physical environment in which we can actually strengthen our spirits, inshallah. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajal farajah. Whenever we actually want to improve anything in ourselves, in our bodies, in our clothings, for example, if we want to purify our clothings, so there are 4 stages. The Urafa mentioned there are 4 stages in which you can purify anything. So for instance, if you want to purify your clothing, there are 4 steps, 4 stages. The first step is the cleanliness from any impurities, from any najasat. So if I am wearing a clothing on my body, it needs to be cleaned from any impurities. For example, there should not be any blood. There should not be anything which is of filth on my clothing. So that is the first step of cleanliness. And it can actually apply to anything. If we give an example of clothing, so that is the one step. The second is the cleanliness from oppression. So whatever I am wearing, for example, I am wearing this garment, it should not be stolen from someone. I may not have oppressed somebody in order to obtain that piece of garment which I am wearing. And same is the case with any food item example. If I am eating something, it should not be obtained from oppression. The third thing is this clothing should not have something which is made from something which is haram. As you know that for men, silk, a clothing which is made from silk is haram. So I need to make sure that the clothing which I am wearing is free from any of such thing which is not being allowed for a human being. Or for example, men, clothing, they should not be wearing anything which is made of gold. They should not be wearing anything which is made from silk. So that is the third step of cleanliness. The fourth step of cleanliness which Urafa mentioned is the cleanliness from vanity. I should not be actually proud of my clothing. If I'm wearing something good, I should not be arrogant. I should not think, okay, this is the best clothing I am wearing and nobody else has it and XYZ. And if someone whom I see does not possess that particular item which I have, so I should not be arrogant over that item which I possess. So those are the 4 steps of cleanliness of anything which Urafa generally mentioned, and we gave an example of clothing. Again, we say the first is it should be pure from any impurities. It should not be having any blood or anything of that sort. The second is cleanliness from oppression. I may not have actually oppressed anyone in order to obtain that piece of garment. The third is actually the cleanliness from any material which is haram, for example silk. And the fourth is the cleanliness from vanity, the spiritual cleanliness, which is very important, the vanity, the arrogance and so on. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we have seen that human body or human soul, we mentioned that there are 2 things in the human individual as an individual. One is the body, other is the spirit or the soul. And we mentioned that the spirit or the soul is very much important. It is being mentioned by Commander of Faithful Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He mentioned that take over your possession through the continuous struggle. So the human being is in constant struggle with the nafs itself. We need to be in constant struggle against ourselves in order to free ourselves from ourselves. So that is a unique type of struggle which human beings actually need to underwent and go through, in contrast to other individual or other creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam alayhi salam then mentions that fight and dominate over your whims and your passions, because if you don't, so they are going to make you as their prisoner, and it is the most humiliating prisoner you will be, which is the prisoner of your own desires. That is the most humiliating prisoner a person can be. And then Imam alayhi salam further mentions that the paradise is purchased through self-struggle. We have to struggle. It's a constant struggle against our own nafs. And whoever is engaged in the self-struggle will be victorious. And what is the reward? Imam alayhi salam mentions that paradise is the greatest reward for someone who really appreciates his worth. In one of the narration, Imam alayhi salam mentions that the least worth of your soul or the spirit is actually Jannah. That is the minimum. That is not maximum. That is the minimum. So make sure you do not sell your soul something which is less than at least the Jannah. And what is the maximum thing? Imam alayhi salam is a perfect example that he actually sold his own soul for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He bought actually the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the night of Hijrah, when he actually slept at the bed of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In another hadith it has been mentioned that once Rasulullah dispatched a group of soldiers to a fight, and when they returned he asked them, and they actually returned very victorious. The fight was successful. They actually defeated the enemy. So Rasulullah says that congratulations for those who have successfully completed the minor struggle, the jihad al-asghar, and you have yet to engage yourself in the greater struggle, which is jihad al-akbar. So the companion asked that what is the jihad al-akbar? We actually went through a jihad which was a very tough thing. We actually defeated the enemy. So what is the greatest jihad? What is the jihad al-akbar, ya Rasulullah? And he said that it is the struggle against your own selves. That is the jihad al-akbar. And then it has been mentioned from, again, Commander of Faithful, Imam Ali alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Please recite aloud salawat again. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. That the best of struggle a human being can undergo is the struggle against his own self, which is being located between his two sides. So a person, the best struggle that a person can undergo is the one which is against their own selves, and the own selves are actually present in between our own sides. It has been mentioned that why the jihad against the nafs is being mentioned as jihad al-akbar, the greatest struggle. And it has been mentioned that the jihad al-akbar, the jihad against the nafs, it is not something which is dependent on a few conditions. So as you know that jihad al-asghar, the jihad which we generally people undergo through sword or maybe guns or whatever, there are some specific conditions, and those conditions must be met in order for a person to actually go through that jihad. And it is not wajib on everybody. It is wajib kifai. It is not wajib aini. It is not wajib on each and every individual. It is wajib on a community in general. If a few people actually do that, that wajib will now no longer be wajib on the rest of the community. However, this jihad al-akbar, which is the fight against our own selves, it is incumbent and wajib on each and every one of us. There is no shortcut to it. It is wajib on someone who is actually old. It is wajib on someone who is young. It is wajib on someone who is a male. It's wajib on someone who is a female. It's wajib on someone who is sick. It is wajib on someone who is actually healthy. So it is wajib on all conditions. So that's why it is known as jihad al-akbar. There is no way out. In contrast, as we see, the physical jihad, there are some specific conditions. that need to be met in order for that jihad to become obligatory. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Ayatollah Ruhullah Khomeini, he has a book by the name of Chehel Hadith, 40 Hadith, and he has actually narrated these 40 Hadith from different Ma'asumin alayhi salam and provided a commentary on it. It's a very amazing and remarkable book. In that Hadith, Imam Khomeini starts with the Hadith which I just mentioned, that Rasulullah returned from a war, and that is the first Hadith with Ayatollah Khomeini actually began his book with. The 10th Hadith is also related to something which is related to jihad and nafs, the struggle against the nafs. And this Hadith, Ayatollah Khomeini mentioned in his book, it starts and it is being mentioned and narrated by Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says that I am afraid, I am apprehensive for you on account of two things. I am afraid that you will be struggling with regards to two things in your life. The first is a submission to desire. You will submit yourself to desires. And the second is cherishing inordinate hopes, long hopes. And then Imam alayhi salam mentions what is the drawback, what is the disadvantage of each of these two things. What is going to happen if people are actually submitting to their desires? And what is going to happen if they are actually cherishing long hopes in their lives? The first thing which Imam alayhi salam mentions is that as to the desire, it prevents you from haqq. The desire is going to prevent you from truthfulness, from haqq. And the inordinate hopes, the long hopes, they are going to make you oblivious or forgetful of the hereafter. If somebody is going after long hopes, now they are not paying attention to the hereafter. That this life is going to end one day and I need to meet my Lord. So these are the two things, and Imam alayhi salam has mentioned what are the disadvantages for us in order to indulge in either the desires or the inordinate long hopes. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. So now the question is, what should we do? So first we are actually trying to pay attention on what is going to happen if we are actually indulging ourselves in and going after desires. Now what is going to happen if we desire something which we should not be desiring? And so far our discussion revolves around things which are halal. Right? We are not talking about something, indulging something which is, God forbid, haram. We are talking about within remaining in the domain of halal, what is the best plan of action for us in order to lead a successful life. What is the best plan of action? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi wa sallam, please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He actually narrates a hadith which I will actually recite verbatim. He says, by my honor, my glory, my greatness, my light, my loftiness. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and by the highness of my station. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned a few vows, a few qasam. And then Allah says, when my slaves gives preference to his desire over my wish, I put his affairs into confusion. So now this is one individual. What is he doing? He is giving preference to his desire over what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is desiring. So now what is going to happen? Allah says, I will put his affairs into confusion and make his life baffling in this world. He will always be confused. He will always be running after things. And his heart preoccupied with the world. He will be always constantly thinking about the world, the worldly things, the worldly affairs. And although I do not give him anything of it except what I have preordained for him. So it does not mean that if you prefer something which you like over what Allah likes, Allah is going to give that to you. No. Allah says that you will be confused, you will be running after those things, yet what is going to happen is what I have desired for that particular servant of mine. And then Allah says, and by my honor, my glory, my greatness, my light, my loftiness, and by the highness of my station, if my slave prefers my wish to his desire. Now it's the opposite. Now the slave is preferring what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants over his own desires, then what is going to happen? My angels will protect him. My angels are going to protect him, and the heavens and the earth will guarantee his sustenance. The risk which people are actually running after, Allah says, I am going to take care of it. And I look after his trade and bring the world to him, though it should be reluctant. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to bring that world to us. We don't have to go after it. Provided the condition is, we have to prefer what Allah wants from us rather than our own desires and wishes. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In Usul-e-Kafi, it has been mentioned from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says that be apprehensive of your desires in the same way you are apprehensive of your enemies. The same way you are afraid and apprehensive and careful with regards to your enemies, be careful with your desires. Why? For there is no greater enemy for human beings than their own desires and what their tongues reap. So human beings should be very careful with what we are desiring in our lives. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So as we know, we are in the holy month of Ramadan, and it's a great opportunity for all of us to practice some sort of self-control, which we already have in the form of fasting. We are refraining ourselves from eating and drinking and all the things which invalidate our fast for a duration of 12, 13, 14, 16 hours. In the same way, we are actually refraining and stopping ourselves from something which is haram. It is more easier for us, not in fact more easy, it is a bit difficult to save ourselves from halal as well as haram, because when you are fasting, you are saving yourselves from halal. Eating and drinking and all the other things, most of those things are actually halal for you. They are permissible. You can do it in your daily life. You can eat, you can drink, no matter what time is it. However, when you are fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that now you have to save yourself from all these halal things for a specific time duration. So in the same way a person can save himself from halal, it should be easy to save ourselves from haram as well. And the idea of self-control is not something which is related to Islam only. It is a very secular concept. So if you see, Stanford University actually conducted a marshmallow test in 1972, and it has been continuing so on as well. And what is in the marshmallow test, what they do is, they ask a kid to sit in a room and they give him one marshmallow. And they say that, okay, we are going out for some time. If you do not eat this marshmallow, we'll come back and give you another one. So we will give two. However, if you eat it in this duration, then you are not going to get anything. You got what you have eaten. So they actually did this experiment on the kids, and they found that those kids who were able to stop themselves from eating the marshmallow in the 15-minute time period were more successful in their future lives. They have higher SAT scores, they have better body mass indices, they are less likely to be indulging in substance abuse and so on. So they found that those kids who actually exercise more self-control are more successful in their lives as compared to those kids who actually give in to their temptation. And this is the idea which we can actually borrow in our lives as well, and we see around that. The struggle which we generally all the time face, our youth face, is of temptation. It is temptation of something which we would like to eat. It is some temptation with something which, God forbid, people like to smoke, and XYZ and so on. So it's the temptation is the root, the foundation, and it is something which actually comes. Sometimes the temptation is actually a very brief moment. If you can control yourself in that particular brief moment, you are fine. It actually goes away. It comes and goes, comes and goes, comes and goes. However, if you give in, you are actually go into a vicious cycle, and it actually continues, and you are actually on your way to a downward spiral. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. An example of self-control, which is, inshallah, this is the last topic, a brief topic which we would like to discuss, is the example of self-control using something which is halal, something which is not haram. It is something which is permissible by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are a few examples in Islamic history, inshallah 2 examples I am going to mention, of those individuals that exercise self-control. The first is the example which is mentioned in the Quran, the army of Talut. It has been mentioned that it was a group of Muslim army. At that time, it was before the advent of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was a group of soldiers, and they actually went to a conquest. And they arrived at a river. And it is mentioned in the Quran that the leader of that army said that whoever drinks from it, he will not be from me. I don't have anything to do with that person. If you're going to drink water from this particular river, except for those who scoop up a handful. If you drink a little bit, that's okay. But if you indulge yourself in water, you are not going to be from me. And when they actually reached that particular river, it has been mentioned that majority of people actually drank from their river. And now when they actually went to fight the Goliath, that is the story of they don't have any strength. Allah removed their strength, and they actually were no longer able to exercise the maximum strength which they generally possess, because they actually did not follow the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about not drinking from that specific river. And if you analyze, drinking from that river, it was water, so it was halal. But Allah wanted to test those individuals. And I would like to see that whether you exercise self-control at this particular instance or not. If you cannot exercise self-control, it is less likely that you will exercise restraint when you go against the enemy and fight, inshallah. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And second is the example of Hazrat Abul Fazl al-Abbas from Karbala. If you see, Mawla Abbas alayhi salam, he actually went to the Euphrates, to the Furat, and he would have drank the water. If he drank water at that particular instance, Imam Hussain alayhi salam would not be upset, because Imam Hussain alayhi salam would like to see his brother's thirst to be quenched. He would be happy to see his brother having water. Yet at the same time, it was lawful, but it was very underfitting for Hazrat Abul Fazl al-Abbas alayhi salam to drink water, yet Imam Hussain alayhi salam and his companions and his kids are thirsty. So it's an example where Hazrat Abul Fazl al-Abbas alayhi salam did not actually drink water, drink something which was halal, just for the happiness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as well as Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And if you see, Hazrat Abul Fazl al-Abbas alayhi salam was constantly reminding himself, when he was actually fighting the enemy, he was used to say, Wallahi in qata'atumu yamini, even if they cut my right hand, I am still going to defend the religion. I am still going to defend the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. With that, inshallah, we conclude tonight's session with the dua that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the strength to actually progress on the path of spiritual journey, and that journey actually takes us nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives everyone, especially our youth, the strength to actually resist against the temptations and save ourselves from all the bad actions and bad deeds, inshallah, and become amongst the followers and nasirin of Imam Zaman Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Recite Surah Fatiha for all marhum Mu'minin Mu'minat, especially Aftar sponsors, marhumin of Aftar sponsors family.